And Coulter, the syndicated columnist, conservative commentator, #1 New York Times best-selling author. Her newest book is Guilty, Liberal Victims and Their Assault on America. And in New York, Reverend Al Sharpton, president and founder of the National Action Network, noted civil rights leader and a syndicated radio host. All right, the statement was issued today from the White House concerning the meeting that took place earlier between the sergeant and the president and the professor. I am thankful to Professor Gates and Sergeant Crowley for joining me at the White House this evening for a friendly, thoughtful conversation. Even before we sat down for the beer, I learned that the two gentlemen spent some time together listening to one another, which is a testament to them. I've always believed that what brings us together is stronger than what pulls us apart. I'm confident that what has happened here tonight, and I'm hopeful that all of us are able to draw this positive lesson from this episode. Ann Coulter, do you think that will put it away?
I don't think it should. And also, by the way, I do think there was a little racial profiling with the president assuming the Irish cop would like to drink beer. No Chablis here. That's a little stereotyping. But no, I mean, I think it is a teachable moment. But the teachable moment needs to go to Barack Obama and to Henry Louis Gates. We have one case after another of these where there is an assumption of racial profiling or racism by cops or by teachers, and you have one hoax after another, from Tawana Brawley to the Duke lacrosse case. I mean, if we're going to claim that there is this rash of racial profiling in America, you know, eventually there's got to be one real case of it.
All right, Al, how do you counter?
Well, first of all, I think that you must deal with the fact that what the president did tonight was absolutely the right thing to do, to set a tone and a climate so we can go forward and deal with both what police are dealing with in terms of trying to fight crime and their fears, and what people have to deal with documented cases of racial profiling. There are 23 states that have laws on racial profiling. There have been any number of states that have studied and documented it. To say that they are all hoaxes is being Ann. I think the fact is that when you see almost half the country dealing with this as state law, even the Justice Department under President Bush documenting the differences in terms of arrest and in terms of stops and searches, I think now we have a climate to deal with it.
And the question is, was this racial profiling? And the other night on this show, Colin Powell said, looking at both sides, he said that the professor was wrong for getting angry. It's a cop. You listen to the cop. The cop was wrong for arresting them. Are you saying, Ann, that there is no racial profiling? Are you saying that doesn't exist?
I'm saying that probably everything under the sun exists at one point or another, whether this is a crisis.
No, that's not the question. Does racial profiling exist?
But no, I do not think that there is an epidemic of racial profiling. I think there is an epidemic of claims of racism that turn out to be a hoax. I mean, like I say, you go back to Tawana Brawley. There was also the case of the Exeter kid, Edmund Perry, I think his name was.
But because those were hoaxes, are you saying that therefore there is no racial profiling because they may not have been racial profiling?
Well, all of the big cases that were released to us, and Bill Clinton citing a racial incident that was known to be a fraud in his Democratic acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention in 1992. There was the Kiko Garcia case in New York, allegedly racial profiling, shot a kid. It turns out he's holding a machete. He was turning.
But do you think? I think the question. Before I come back to Al, Ann, do you think it's possible that a black man in America last night might have been stopped by someone, by a policeman, just because he was black?
I think it's possible that a man bit a dog yesterday. But if I keep hearing about man-biting dog stories, I want to see one real one. What we have is dog-bite-man stories, and we're told every time the man-bite-dog story turns out to be false, what you hear is, well, okay, this one wasn't true, but there are all the other ones.
Hold it. Sergeant Crowley spoke to the media after he had the beer with the president and the professor. Here's a little of what he said, and then we'll have Al comment.
What you had today was two gentlemen agree to disagree on a particular issue. I don't think that we spent too much time dwelling on the past. We spent a lot of time discussing the future.
What did you make of that, Al? Good idea?
I think that it is a good idea, particularly of now those in law enforcement and those that are involved in fighting for these cases can come together and sit with those in government and try in this climate of trying to deal with what is fair and equal for all, do that. I mean, I remember when Janet Reno had began that, I would hope that Eric Holder and others picked that up. And I think that the fact of the matter is there are clear cases that have to be dealt with. I mean, you can go from Rodney King to Abner Louima on where people went to jail. I'm not going to get into this argument with Ann. Clearly, 23 states are not hallucinating racial profiling. And Colin Powell sat on this show the other night talking about his own experiences going to a counter. So all of these people are not making this up. To go 23 years ago to Brawley, I mean, try to find something this century, and we're talking about a problem that well, the Duke lacrosse case was not about profiling. That was about a report. You maybe need to find out what profiling is.
Claim of racism,
but racial profiling is when there is an assumption made based on race, when there is no one that had called in a report. And I think maybe if you understood the definition, you could not deny it.
Although, do you think it's possible that you think Colin was right when he said the professor overreacted?
The question becomes, that's why you need to have law enforcement and all of these forces sit. The question is, what is overreaction in your own home? We need to define that. Is it possible? Sure. What we need to do now is deal with law. If you're in your house, someone comes to your door, you think it's the repairman, it is not, they order you out of the house, however you respond, is that overreaction? The fact of the matter is, what we do know is the prosecutor said, we're not going forward with this case. It's interesting to me, the police unions, Larry, were mad at the president. They never questioned the prosecutor's decision, saying, we are not going forward, which meant what undermined the arrest was not the president, not those that supported Dr. Gates like me, but when the prosecutor stopped the case.
And on the other hand, if it's your house, and forget racial, it's your house, they're questioning you about your own house, would you be ticked?
In fact, I have been, at least in the initial crankiness by Professor Gates, I have been somewhat of a defender of his, in as much as I am someone who travels a lot, and I get cranky too, especially after a long trip from China. What it can't be defended, I think, is the next 48 hours, the next week, when he could calm down and think, oh boy, I overreacted, wish I hadn't done that. But I think that is a problem. Both aggrieved minorities and aggrieved females are told to take every slight, interpret everything as, oh, it's because you're black, it's because you're a woman. And I don't think that's good for blacks or females, and I don't think it's good for the rest of the country. And there's just one thing I'd like to say about the studies on racial profiling, and even the Bush administration coming up with them. The Bush administration itself suppressed a study that disproved 8 billion racial profiling studies about the New Jersey state troopers. There was a scientific study setting up cameras of people speeding. It turns out New Jersey state troopers, by scientific evidence that was their Bush administration kept rejecting, were stopping, if anything, not enough blacks.
So you're saying
I gotta get a break, guys. Hold it. I'll come right back. Hold it. I'll come right back with you. Hold it. Okay. Hold it. By the way, who are you more likely to agree with, Ann or Al? I think they disagree. Go to CNN.com/Larry King and have your say. And by the way, the Boston police officer who's in hot water over all of this, he'll be with us in a little while. Stay with us.
Welcome back. One liberal talk show host who accused RNC Chair Reince Priebus and Republicans of stoking racism during the GOP convention just defended himself.
Chris Matthews, are you taking heat for being willing to call a comment racist sometimes before anyone else has raised the issue?
It is an international reality, and everybody feels it on that side of the racial divide. And it's disgusting that white people to whom the dog whistle is aimed refuse to acknowledge it. It is there. It's been part of our politics. We thought it was gone. It's back, and it's being used to get votes.
But our next guest says racism would be dead if it weren't for the mainstream media. Ann Coulter is the author of a provocative new book. It's called Mugged, Racial Demagoguery from the 70s to Obama. She joins us live today. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
The book is great in so much as it tells the history of race relations in this country.
Yes, and the Democrats have a lot to be apologetic about.
They really do, because the way you lay it out, while LBJ seems to get all the credit for signing the Civil Rights Act, it was actually Eisenhower who got the ball rolling.
Yeah, and for 100 years after the Civil War, fought by Republicans to end slavery, it's Republicans constantly introducing civil rights bills that were blocked by Democrats. Why is it that the 1964 Civil Rights Act is treated as if it's the only civil rights act in U.S. history? Because that was the first one in history ever pushed by a Democrat.
Right.
And by the way, LBJ, when he was a senator, ferociously opposed the 1957 and 1960 Civil Rights Act being pushed by Eisenhower and Nixon. And if I could just say about Chris Matthews, it's curious in that clip he cites all the black people coming up to him, then cites black people in other countries whom he refers to as African Americans. That's because here in America, he doesn't have any black friends. He doesn't have any black neighbors. His son, I have the URL in the book. There is a big picture of his son's wedding, 100 people in the church, not a black face in the group. You know, any Republican with the facts of Chris Matthews' life would be convicted of racism in 2 seconds. He's a race bean counter for every Tea Party, every Republican gathering. He doesn't have any black friends.
You talk in your book a lot about how the left plays a race card to keep the black community.
Yes. Yes, I mean, step one is tell black people that Republicans hate them for 100 years. Actually, only since, I guess, the Democrats finally started to come on around the mid-60s. Once the civil rights battles were won, you have liberals play acting against non-existent racism and telling the world that Republicans and Tea Partiers are racist. Step two is taunt Republicans for not having more blacks in their party.
Sure. You start in the 70s, and well, historically, and then you go through the 70s at great length, and then you talk about President Obama. And you cite in the 2008 race when President Obama and his camp played the race card on Bill Clinton, on John McCain, on Sarah Palin.
On poor little Geraldine Ferraro. Yeah, well, this book was a very quick turnaround because I realized it's going to be nothing but racial demagoguery. Through this election campaign, that the Democrats can't run on Obama's record. They can't dig up divorce files on Mitt Romney, so what's it going to be? It's going to be race-baiting Republicans, which they did in 2008. So I wanted to get the book out quickly. As a result, the jacket flap indicates that, well, Obama doesn't really engage in the race-baiting. When I actually got to the end of the book and wrote those chapters, there's a lot more than I thought coming directly from the president.
You also, chapter 16, the media cry racist in a crowded theater, you have a list, kind of a laundry list of things that if you support a certain thing, the media quick to label you a racist. For instance, if I were opposed to Obamacare...
Racist.
All right. If I joined a Tea Party...
Yes, definitely racist.
If I use... if you're simply a Republican or support gun rights...
And the word the. Don't forget the word the, because Fox News contributor Alan Combs actually brought the word the up with me last night on his radio show. The, if you say the blacks. And meanwhile, I mean, you have, for example, and I quote a whole series of introductions from Rachel Maddow of her very, very, very special black guest, Melissa Harris-Lacewell. I mean, this is not a person that is comfortable around black people. Every introduction of a black guest is, you are wicked smart. You are so smart. You're the smartest. And then, you know, poor nerd white guest Chris Hayes, it's... And now, from The Nation, Chris Hayes, good to see you. These are not people who have black friends, who